Good evening, everybody. My name is Peggy Epic, and please do add your name, where you're from, in the chat box so we can see where everyone is joining us from. Um, so again, my name is Peggy Epic, and on behalf of the Lancaster Conservancy, welcome to Nature Hour. So I am a conservation educator at Lancaster Conservancy, and I work to educate both the public, volunteers, sometimes even the staff, about conservation ethics, conservation technique and methodology. And that is our mission at the Conservancy. And speaking of mission, the Lancaster Conservancy's mission is to provide wild and forested lands and clean waterways for our community forever. We protect the ancestral lands of the Susquehannock, the Conestoga, and the Shanks Ferry people, who were the original land stewards of the Susquehanna Riverlands and the Highlands and beyond. For over 50 years, our organization has sought out natural places so precious and beautiful that they must be protected. Our stewardship team works hard to restore these special places by creating trails, planting trees, and creating healthy meadow and grasslands, which, by the way, are some of the most endangered ecosystems in the eastern United States. These preserves are open for you to hunt, hike, fish, and birdwatch 365 days a year. So please see our website for a full list of all our nature preserves, and you'll find all the information you need to make either your first or your next visit both enjoyable and safe. So we launched Nature Hour with the goal of bringing local and regional experts to you with presentations that help us better understand the Conservancy's work and the work of our community partners. Tonight's program will run about 40 to 45 minutes, with the time included at the end for Q&A. And if you have a question, please use that feature at the bottom of your screen, and I'll try my best to get everything in during our conversation with Kate, or to answer your questions at the conclusion of our program. So this is the third lecture of our 2024 Nature Hour season. The next and final 2024 Nature Hour program will take place in person at Lancaster Public Library, March 6th, with Keith Williams presenting a great talk on discovering our spring ephemerals. And you can register online to attend that in person on our events page at www.lancasterconservancy.org. So let me get my introduction slide started here. Give me just a moment. Oh, of course, it had to start at the end. Let me just run back. That's much easier. So I just want to give a huge shout out to our sponsors. And here they all are. We're blessed with incredible corporate support. And now I'd like to recognize sponsors with this shout out. Thank you to the Wenger Group, Perky Pet, Clark Associates, Electron Energy Group, Eurofins, Penstone, PP&L Electric Utilities, and Ritu Associates. But our featured sponsor tonight is the Lancaster County Solid Waste Management Authority that supports all of our work in Leave No Trace education. So a special thank you for their continued support. So again, tonight's program is titled Making Your Mark by Leaving No Trace. I do want to say up front that this scene is not from a Lancaster Conservancy preserve, but it's both beautiful and a little disturbing, which might be a good way to start this program. It is, however, found in the Michaud State Forest over by Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, if you want to visit that. Meeting of the Pines natural area. So before I start the program and turn it over to Kate, I want you to take a look at something. And I saw this today. So this is taken today on a loop hike that I did at Kelly's Run Nature Preserve. Just a basic 4-mile hike around the preserve, checking on trail conditions and blowdowns and things that we need to do before hiking season officially starts. Although there were a lot of people out today. So I'd like to ask, what do you see here? How did it get there? And from my perspective, why wasn't it there just a month ago? I walked past the same place a month ago and this was not there. So if you've decided this is an old dump site, you're absolutely right. But it's been dug up and uncovered recently, however, by somebody using a metal detector, probably searching for items of value to them specifically. And this lies just along the trail. In fact, you can't avoid stepping over it. You have to physically walk around it. So there's two bits, two parts to this bit of trailside blight, and that is the original dump, which over time was buried under soils and leaves and, just over time detritus. So it was invisible initially to anybody walking by, but recently it was uncovered and dug through and were scattered all around. So that's the second part of that scene. So there it is, exposed in all of its 1970s era trashy glory. So I'm wondering then, looking at this, what is a land ethic, which is really what leave no trace principles are. And so I was checking out the Aldo Leopold Foundation website for the definition. They are the organization that kind of does all things land ethic. And so this is what's like right up on their front page as a definition. So the land ethic expands the definition of community to include not just humans, but all other parts of the earth, as well as soils, waters, animals, so everything that makes up the land. And in a land ethic, they go on to say the relationships between people and the land are intertwined. So people cannot be separated from the land. And so land ethic is a moral code of conduct that stems from these interconnections. That's kind of the big philosophical foundation on which a lot of other kinds of ethics are placed, including leave no trace. So if you want to know more about land ethics, or you actually want to do something with land ethics, we invite you to attend the March 16th Leopold Education Project one-day or full-day workshop at Climbers Run Nature Center. And this is something that you can check out on our events page as well. It includes a Friday night public screening of the film Green Fire, which is a biography of Aldo Leopold. But the second day, the full workshop day on Saturday, March 16th, will be a lot of fun, hands-on, really engaging stuff for anybody that is interested in this, including youth leaders, teachers, conservation managers, landowners, everybody listed there. So do check out our events page if you want to learn more or sign up. So without further ado, I'm absolutely honored to introduce my wonderful colleague, Kate Prisby from the Lancaster Conservancy, who is also a leave no trace educator. So I am super stoked to hear what she has to say, and I'll be monitoring any questions you have and possibly interrupting Kate in conversation, no less, as she presents tonight. So if there's anything pressing or that you have to know, don't hesitate to ask, and I'll find the right time to insert your question. So Kate, could you introduce yourself and take us to Leave No Trace?
Sure. Thank you, Peggy. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to spend a virtual evening with all of you that are here in Lancaster County and in other parts of the US. My name is Kate Prisby, and I am working with Lancaster Conservancy this year as one of their interpretive rangers. Last year, I had the opportunity to work for a friends organization that partners with Acadia National Park up in the state of Maine. And Acadia is in the top 5 most visited national parks in the United States. And my primary responsibility while working up there was interacting with all of the park visitors to educate them about Leave No Trace. Sometimes that was upwards of 450 people a day that I would speak with out on trail. And so it's nice to share some of the things that I learned about Leave No Trace last year and present to all of you this evening. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So, Leave No Trace. As Peggy was saying earlier, the Lancaster Conservancy's mission is to provide wild and forested lands and clean waterways to our community forever. And to set the stage for our conversation this evening, I would love if you'd all take a moment and post into the chat box something that has made an important memory for you when you've been outside. That might be time spent outside with a loved one or a pet, or perhaps something in the actual physical landscape that made that time outside really important to you. And your feedback's going to help set the stage for how we go about discussing Leave No Trace this evening. And Peggy, if you're just willing to share what's coming up in the chat box, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So here's some additions. So from Anthony, no city sounds, fresh air, sounds of nature. Krista also writes, she says, hiking with grandparents. As a grandparent, I'll put 5 stars next to that one.
Well, thanks to those of you that shared, and other folks, as things come to mind, feel free to put them into the chat box. So for many of us, we go to the outdoors for a myriad of reasons. It might be to experience time wondering about the natural world as a child or connecting with your children. During the pandemic, it might have been to spend time in safe outdoor spaces with loved ones when social distancing was still really important. And for some of us, it's a way of building community by going to volunteer events. And for lots of us, it's also about finding those quiet places of inner calm, but also experiencing calm in the wild. Leave No Trace is about being in community with the land and with each other. It's a way of ensuring that the time we spend outdoors promotes a thriving ecosystem for plants, for animals, but also for us. And it's a way of making sure that we have as little impact on the land as possible. For myself, I like to think of it kind of as like being a good house guest when I'm visiting someone, except it's all about being a good guest of nature when I'm going into outdoor spaces. So the state of Pennsylvania, which is where Lancaster Conservancy is, the state parks and forest tracked what visitation looked like in the years after the pandemic. Lancaster Conservancy didn't keep hard numbers, but just to kind of give a sense for how visitation really spiked after the pandemic. Within the state parks and forests in Pennsylvania, 2021, there were 42.2 million visitors to the state parks and forests. And this was over an 11% increase from pre-pandemic visitation. So one of the things that Leave No Trace asks us is how we can use shared lands and increase that use without having a rise in negative impacts on the land. So the first principle of Leave No Trace is plan ahead and prepare, or know before you go. This is all about making sure you're setting yourself up for a successful adventure in the outdoors. And success means you put some time into planning ahead of time. So if you're heading out into the outdoors, you're heading out for a hike, you want to make sure that you have all the things that you need with you. That includes things like your water and your snacks, having the proper clothing. And the proper clothing means you've taken the time to look at what the weather is supposed to be for the day. It also means knowing that you've taken a little bit of time to do some research and figure out what the terrain is going to be like, and that you have a couple of basic first aid supplies just in case things get a little bit awry out there. And it also means you know what the regulations are for the place that you're visiting. Lancaster Conservancy, like state parks and forest or game lands, have a lot of those regulations and a lot of the information on their website. So what we have here is a picture of Wind Cave, which is on Clark Nature Preserve. And if you were to go to the Conservancy's website, you'd be able to bring up a map, which indicates by the little arrow where the Wind Cave is. And if you dug a little farther into researching the hike, you'd see that you can go into the cave, which might prompt you to throw a headlamp into your pack as well. The second principle of leave no trace is to travel and camp in durable surfaces, or in the case of the Conservancy where camping's not allowed, just making sure that you're traveling on durable surfaces. Durable surfaces are the ones that are going to have the least impact by you treading on them. The point of staying on them is if you're on a marked trail, you're less likely to get lost when you're out exploring. And if you're out on a trail and it has mud puddles or water, the durable surface is to actually go through that puddle or that mud as opposed to heading off to the side of the trail. If you've been on trails that seem exceptionally wide, it's oftentimes because people have been going around a wet, muddy spot and thus widening the trails. And if you're in an area like Lancaster Conservancy or some other area where the neighbors have private property, it's always good practice to respect those private property signs and to stay within the public boundaries. I know a lot of folks that are familiar with the Lancaster preserves are excited to see what's going on at Tuckwon Glen. So you can still currently hike at Tuckwon Glen, even though the parking is still closed at this point in time. But one of the reasons that the Tuckwon Glen rehab started in 2020 was because this was one of the preserves that had a very large spike in visitation. And as such, it was one of the preserves that had a lot of erosion taking place in the trail system. So right now, a lot of those trails have been rerouted. They have been put in spots in the landscape where the water is shedding off of the trail more effectively. And then there's also been a lot of rock work done to really ensure that there are a lot more durable surfaces that are going to last for generations to come. So when you are out on preserves, it is always good practice to trash your trash and pick up poop or dispose of waste properly. And you can all get your fingers ready at the chat box. I have 2 true and false questions for you to test your knowledge of what disposing of your waste properly looks like. So like I said, for those of you that are out of state, Lancaster Conservancy is in central Pennsylvania. And our first true and false question is to see if you all know how quickly biodegradable trash that is frequently found on preserved lands actually needs to biodegrade. So is this a true statement or a false statement? Banana peels in central Pennsylvania can take, if left on trail, up to 2 years to decompose. Orange peels can take up to 6 months, and pistachio shells can take 2 to 3 years to decompose. True or false? Peggy, you can ring us in with what the audience thinks.
Looks like everybody's hit the true button there, typing in true.
Yes, exactly. So even if something is biodegradable, it is still food scraps that don't belong in the wilderness, and they should head down trail with you as opposed to staying there for people to see in months or years to come. Our second true and false question has to do with animal poop and the kind of animal that you bring into the woods. True or false? According to the US Center for Disease Control, 1 day worth of pet waste can contain several billion bacteria, including Giardia, the eggs of roundworms, the eggs of hookworms, and the eggs of tapeworms. True or false?
Oh, again, all true.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the reasons pet waste should not be left in the woods, not just because it's unsightly, but because it also can contain a lot of bacteria that is harmful to animals that live in the woods that might want to eat it or check it out. So taking your pet waste provides another layer of protection for the local ecosystem. And if the thing that has to go in the woods is you, the human, you're in luck because most of Lancaster County's preserves, the Conservancy preserves, have outhouses at a lot of the trailheads. And if it's mid-hike that you need to go to the bathroom, that's not a problem. You just want to get far off trail and away from water, and then pretend that you're a cat by digging yourself your own little cat hole and using that as your pit toilet. But of course, cover up whatever you drop into your own pit toilet. Fourth principle of leave no trace is leave it as you find it. Leave it as you find it is important because, like many of you said, you're going into nature to experience the wild, and we want to make sure that we're leaving wild things where they thrive. The Conservancy preserves are home to some rare plant species, as well as an abundance of native wildflowers. These are what attract people to the preserves, but these things also draw and nourish bees and box turtles and ample bird species. By leaving what we find, we support the natural ecosystem. And when it's a historical artifact that we find, we leave it there so it can teach people about the previous generations that lived on the land. So in other words, take a photo, but leave the object. Fifth, we want to make sure we're keeping wildlife wild. So if you look at this picture, this is from Ferncliff, one of the preserves, and there is a snake that you can see on the right side of the tree making its way up the tree. And right before finding it, I came across some hikers who were really startled by the snake as it had slithered across the trail. And their first question was, should we kill it? Is it dangerous? But when we're out in nature, we want to respect the wildlife that's out there. And one of the ways we can respect wildlife is by using the rule of thumb. So the rule of thumb is where you stretch your arm out all the way and you close one eye and you try to make sure that your thumb can completely block out the animal that you're looking at. And if it does, then you're usually at a safe distance where you're giving that animal the space it needs to feel comfortable. But if your thumb doesn't completely block out that animal, you just want to step farther back to give it more space. Animals can change their dietary habits when we start feeding them. So while it might be attractive to try to feed the animals or the birds in nature, that's something you should resist the temptation to. And if you are somebody that is an active birder and you are heading out into the wilderness to try to work on your bird call IDs, best practice is to record the bird that you hear, but take that recording back home or to an inside space and then play bird calls that sound like it to help you identify it. That's better practice than playing bird calls out in the wilderness because some birds are territorial and that can disrupt their natural habits. And then last but not least, in terms of the principles that are the ones that are practiced on the Lancaster Conservancy preserves, is to share your trails and to manage your pet. So this is a picture from Texter Mountain, the most northern preserve that the Conservancy has. And as you can see in this very small stretch of trail, it's just rock hopping. So keeping your pet on a leash is important for a few reasons. For one, it helps hikers that have to use some agility to navigate sections of the trail and ensure that there's not going to be a dog leaping up at them. But there also are folks that are leery of animals, and there are other animals in the wilderness that you might not want your pet getting at. And so keeping your dog on a leash ensures the safety of other hikers, as well as ensures that your pet stays safe out in the wilderness. Other good practices are, if you are somebody that likes to hike listening to music, to wear in earbuds. That way everyone else that's in the woods gets to hear nature, but not the music that you like to work out to. And then, as always, a friendly greeting goes a long way. And if you're a slower hiker, you can step aside onto a durable surface for faster hikers to get by you. Lancaster Conservancy is on social media, and we know that a lot of you are as well. Social media can be a great way to excite and inspire people to get outdoors. Leave No Trace is an opportunity. There's opportunities on social media to promote Leave No Trace by how you choose to post about your time outside. So if you're going to be posting about a great national park or a preserve that you're on, we would ask that you be thoughtful about the images that you portray and to make sure that whatever you're posting on social media demonstrates you practicing Leave No Trace. And when you're posting about these beautiful outdoor spaces, feel free to put a little bit of information about the environmental practices that will keep these places pristine for generations to come. When folks learn Leave No Trace, as this young scout troop was aware of last year when they were volunteering at Climbers Run, when folks learn about Leave No Trace, they have the power to teach it and amplify the message to others. You can be on the forefront of being a positive outdoor change and being an educator to others about how they can enjoy the outdoors and make their mark by leaving no trace. And for those of you that would like to dig more deeply into Leave No Trace or Lancaster Conservancy, we have both websites here. Leave No Trace has a lot of free online classes on their website. They're actually an international organization. So if you look up Leave No Trace, you'll find free online classes. You'll also find teaching resources that are great for all ages. So if you're a public educator and you take school kids outside, they've got resources for young children, and they also have resources for adults that are going out into the woods. And I know we have a lot of folks here in Pennsylvania tonight. Leave No Trace is offering some free programs at the Delaware Water Gap this summer in June. But if you're not from Pennsylvania, they are also offering free workshops all across the United States this year. So if you check out their website, you can see where the Leave No Trace staff is going to be, in which areas, and where they're doing workshops. And if you're here in Lancaster County, you're welcome to join the Conservancy. We have a lot of upcoming volunteer work days. These include things like habitat restoration, removing invasive species, doing water quality testing. We also have a lot of great habitat workshops coming up, so you can transform the outdoor space in your own yard into local habitat that will sustain pollinators. And then we have, almost on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, guided hikes that staff lead. And like what was mentioned earlier, there are lots of preserve maps and information about all of Lancaster Conservancy's properties on the Conservancy website. And with that, we would welcome any questions that you might all have.
I have a question.
Go for it.
Okay. So being out on the preserves quite a bit, hiking around, checking on trails, guiding and leading groups. I know it's a messy topic, but what about those dog poop bags? I mean, seriously, we are not the dog poop fairy, picking up bags. I mean, there were several out today that people had left or had been there for some time. And I know people pick it up. It's clear it's in the bag, but what can we do to, I don't know, package it, bring it back with us? Is that what folks are concerned about? I don't know.
I'm not a dog owner, so I'm not personally sure what people are concerned about, especially having packed out lots of strangers' dog poop myself. But I would say anyone heading out into the woods, if you're willing to pick that up and just throw an extra bag and maybe glove, like a plastic glove in your bag, it goes a long way. And I also think it's good to model cleaning up. It's not fun to clean up after others, but I think when people see it, it drives home the message that our collective actions are all important in taking care of the communal good.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So if everybody went out with the idea that just to be prepared to pick up something that needs to be brought back in, that would be a huge help for
Yeah.
everyone. So let me check our question answer. Nobody on question answer yet. But I mean, I don't know. Going back to the dog poop bag fairy idea, if anybody out there has any suggestions on how you pack it back, I mean, dog owners who might be listening tonight, do you have like a method or an idea on how to safely and cleanly pack it back to the trailhead and then onto a trash receptacle? Let us know. Oh, here's a comment. Um, yeah, right. I'm gonna read Lori's comment question. What is the best way to approach people we see littering? If they pick it up in front of you, they may just toss it further down the trail. So approaching people.
Well, what I've generally found is most of the litter that I see people throwing into the woods is biodegradable. And I still think there's a very common mindset that if it's biodegradable, it's not really littering, because it will eventually break down. And or like it's an apple core, apples grow in this area, what does it matter? So what I would always encourage folks to do is just approach the conversation assuming that the person genuinely just does not know, and saying something simple like, hey, I noticed you tossing this into the woods. It is biodegradable. It will eventually break down, but the period of time that it will take this thing to break down is actually quite extended. And one of the reasons that it's good to take out your food trash is we don't want to be attracting wild animals close to the side of the trail. We want to make sure that whatever is out there that is edible and appealing to animals is what they would normally be eating, and that's not the same thing that we eat. What I've usually found is that at that point, folks are very willing to go pick up what they threw without even asking them to explicitly do that. Or just saying like, don't worry about it. I have a trash bag with me to pick up trash. I can go pick it up and I'll carry it out. And then that's also a gentle way of letting folks know that, hey, maybe on your next trip, if you're going to generate trash, you should have a trash bag with you so you can take it with you.
Great ideas. Anthony's answering, making a suggestion about that dog poop bag situation. He says carry Ziploc bags and then pack the doggy bags in that to pack out. So yeah, pack an extra bag. Good suggestion, Anthony. I had a question today actually on the trail. So it's not going to show up in our chat box, but I came across a hiker who was enjoying what a lot of our viewers typed in tonight, like the silence, just the sounds of nature. And she had encountered earlier in her hike, actually on another preserve. This was her second preserve of the day, was someone walking along with, one of those USB rechargeable speakers, and they were blasting music from their cell phone. And she wondered if that wasn't some kind of a, you know, not leave no trace specifically, but some kind of like an issue that needs to be dealt with. Here's what I told her. I said, if you have concerns about the things that you encounter, or practices um, that you may not feel kind of are in alignment with some of these, leave no trace principles, definitely let us know what you heard and what you saw, what you encountered. Um, but she said it didn't bother her for more than a couple of minutes because the other hiker was approaching past her and went on. But she said it was loud, and to the point of our contributors on the chat tonight, it's the the silence and the sound of the birds that folks who are hiking really enjoy. Um, so yeah, so that's something to think about, is not just visually what you see, but sometimes what you hear.
Mhm.
So here's another yeah, this is a good question. Thanks, Avery. What is a social trail, and how can I determine which trails are intentional and which are social trails? Is it okay to walk on social trails once they've been established? What is a social trail?
So a social trail is not an intentional trail. And what I mean by intentional is it's not one that the folks that manage that land, it's not one that they put there. So a social trail is usually when one person sees something in the landscape that looks interesting to them, and they go off trail to go get a better view of it. And then somebody else comes along noticing, oh, it looks like somebody went down this way. I wonder what's down there. I want to go check it out. And you get enough people going off trail to check out whatever that thing is, and it eventually looks like an intentional trail. Um, Best practice, if you know it's a social trail, best practice is to not go down it. One of the things that land management agencies will do is they'll get volunteers, or they'll get staff to go out and try to cover up those social trails. And there's usually two reasons for doing that. One is social trails can lead people astray, and folks can get lost depending on how long the trail ends up being. So there's that element that it can cause some risk to folks that are recreating in getting off trail. But then the other is it ends up eroding the local ecosystem. So obviously, putting trails into the woods also impacts the ecosystem. But part of what land managers try to assess is how to have a well-built trail that takes you to the most interesting elements of that landscape, as long as the interesting element is not also like ecologically fragile, in which case they probably are not going to take you to that spot. But building a well-designed trail that takes in a lot of the natural features of the area, while also making sure that those pristine areas that need to be intact and not explored are not part of the trail system. So it can be really hard to actually know what is the real trail and what is a social trail. The Conservancy tries to blaze all of their trails. So I would say if you've hiked for a couple of minutes and you haven't seen a blaze, then maybe turn around and head back to the last area that you saw a blaze. And that's one way to figure out if you're on a social trail or not.
That's good advice. Because where I was today, you could see the beginnings of two social trails that are not part of the actual trail system. To where they're going, I don't know. Maybe I should check that out. You mentioned volunteers. Um, we are just so proud of our volunteer crew at Lancaster Conservancy, and we have a lot of folks who are volunteers, and they do a number of different things. Some are those land stewards, volunteer land stewards who are out there doing that trail work, removing invasive plants, and doing so in such a way that you wouldn't even know they were there, right? So even our land steward crew is practicing leave no trace by trying to be, really subtle about some of the big work that they do. We also have education volunteers who work with school groups and public groups who are on preserve for specific programs. We have outreach and tabling volunteers as well. Is it true, Kate, that all of our volunteers are getting leave no trace training this year?
They are, at least that's the intention. Yeah, so if you are a volunteer and you haven't been checking out your email, do check it out, because there are 2 upcoming training events for a much more in-depth leave no trace training, where we'll spend time out on the preserve trails, actually learning about leave no trace in the actual landscape, and also going over how you can teach leave no trace to folks that are coming to the preserves, and having very gentle yet informative conversations with folks on how to go about following leave no trace after you've maybe witnessed somebody that's not following the best land ethics.
Great. I can't wait.
Yeah, should be good.
Thanks for doing this. Well, I don't see any more questions or comments in our chat or Q&A box. And so I guess we can make our conclusion statements now. I'll say first off, thank you. We love you to our Lancaster Conservancy volunteers, and we'll see you at the next training, which is Leave No Trace. Kate, what do you want to follow up with?
Yeah, so I'd just like to say thanks everyone for coming this evening. And I know a lot of times, as somebody that is an avid lover of the outdoors, leave no trace to me, I always thought of as really basic, and that's because I grew up with a lot of these things being taught to me. But when we think back to the statistics of what a large increase there has been in outdoor recreation within the last few years, I think there are a lot of people that genuinely just don't know what the best practices are. So a kind reminder when you're observing something that you know could be done differently can go a long way in just educating someone that truly does want to bring their best self into the outdoors, but just needs a little bit of guidance on what that means.
That's great advice. Kate, thank you so much for the presentation tonight, and moving forward. A whole new season is starting for us. We're about to get really busy. And I want to encourage all of our viewers, listeners, to do check out our events page for how you can get involved or attend any of our programs, or even sign up as a volunteer. We'd love to have you. And without, yeah, it looks like, oh, wait. Thanks, Anthony. Anthony says thank you. It was great to have you along. So I will see you out there on the preserves. And remember that our last Nature Hour presentation is in person at the Lancaster Public Library in town. And you can sign up for that on our events page as well. So if there's nothing else to be said or done, I cannot wait to get outside during this nice but weird weather. And Kate, again, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.